I want to introduce Chef Charles Phan from the famed restaurant The Slanted Door. I remember I've been going to his restaurant since '95, so it's a real pleasure to have him here. He's a real San Francisco success story. How many restaurants do you have now, and what's on the horizon for you?
We actually have 5. We had 6, and we're down to 5. The next one, I guess always my favorite one, the new one. We're doing a bourbon and Creole concept. We haven't figured out a name yet. Some working title like Bird Bar or Horseshoes. The idea is just have these vintage, out of production bourbon that it doesn't exist anymore. Unfortunately, that whole industry is just dying because all these old little distillery, they make some great bourbon. It takes like 20 years to age. And so we want to showcase that and Creole and fried chicken. So that's coming up.
Yeah, and I was just hearing you talk about you actually won some awards for your mixology. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Crazy enough, our family, not just the immediate family, we started the company 17 years ago, and most of the head manager has been with me 15 or more. So about 12 years ago, we started serving cocktail. We were really the first local San Francisco restaurant to do mixology and doing things naturally and organic product. Remember, the first cocktail we made was like a margarita. I didn't want to use these plastic lime that comes in a little plastic ball and rosa mix. And this year at the Tail Cocktail, this is a convention for all the cocktail folks. And if you guys, I think regular folks can go sign up. It's a week long of drinking and research in New Orleans, and they gave our award. It was 4 nominations, and we won the category of best restaurant bar. And they have, I think, regular bar, hotel bar, restaurant bar. And it was really amazing that the colleague of the cocktail world think we make the best cocktail. Actually, there was competition from London also. Their European was also in the mix for this award.
So you mentioned that your restaurant, there's a real family atmosphere involved. You actually have some real family members that work for you, don't you?
Yeah, I got 22 relatives, but I don't have a choice in that. I have to hire them because my mom says so, and I can't really fire them. I guess I can fire them if they do something illegal. Like hitting somebody, that would be illegal. Well, the family aspect of it, I came and I want to do classic Vietnamese food with organic ingredient. And I have a background in architecture, so I want to do modern design, and I didn't want to have a restaurant with bamboo and Buddha and stuff like that. And not that that's bad, but that's just not my thing. And I was just tired of the stereotyping, and I want to do that. But once we started doing it, and I needed help on the wine, and we have a wine director for 14 years, and he finally quit and went to farming. We were the first company in San Francisco to do Riesling, and no one were doing Riesling. And we were getting a lot of flack for that, but it's really go with our food. Napa Valley was kind of angry that we don't use them, but it just was hard because the alcohol content will make the Vietnamese food taste bad and make the wine taste bad. But now Napa Valley is growing a lot of lower alcohol stuff that under 14%, and that work with our food. Same thing with our cocktails. So we apply the same methodology to everything we do. From composting, we were the first company composting using with the garbage company. They were a guinea pig 17 years ago, and San Francisco developed a whole system of composting. It was unlike any other place because of the Kyoto summit. They had want to reduce their waste by 50% by, I can't remember, a couple years ago, and we were the first company part of the guinea pig. And literally today, we produce only 16% waste of all our facility. Everything gets composted. The oil gets recycled. In fact, there's people come and pick it up take the used oil that we take and go make something with it, which I'm not allowed to say, but they pick up my oil so it doesn't go into a landfill or the sewage system. The cocktail, same thing. I just want to make it simple. Food with a story, have a history. So my philosophy behind all this, and hence the book, is to bring a little piece of Vietnam to here, but using local ingredient and using sort of local sensibility. What I mean by that is, I can't really cook beef well done because most folk here, don't like shoe leather. But in Vietnam or other part of the country, they might like their meat cooked a little bit more. So, but I remember eating shaking beef, a dish that's very popular at Slanted Door, in a hotel in 1992, and they were using flank steak, smaller cut. And I thought the flavor was great, but I thought the beef was a little chewy. Then opening year, at the time there was a lot of airline filet, and you used to be able to get like whole medallion of filet at United first class, and everybody was doing that back then still. So they had these tails that no one wants, and I was really cheap, and I got them, and I cut in little pieces, and I was serving filet, and I sort of created that dish using filet. And today, the airline industry kind of stopped serving filet, and we buy a grass-fed. We continue to improve using a grass-fed beef filet, and we're using a organic watercress for the bedding. So the recipe is traditional, but just the way we present it. So I don't try to really mess with the food. I mean, I kind of, a lot of the kitchen folks like to play around with sous vide, bag, and foam and all that, but sometimes I don't let that get in the way, because I think it really, our mission is always bring a little story about the food and tell you this is how the Vietnamese doing it. This is the Vietnamese aesthetic. Whether you like it or not is not my issue. It's for me to present it. Obviously, if you don't like it too much, I'll go out of business. So I had to make food that people like to eat. But we always want to challenge that. And I cooked dinner the other night at Chez Panisse, and one of the courses we want to do a sardine clay pot with cherry tomato, and a few people, my chef, say, "Wow, this is so fancy, you should fillet it." I say, "No, in Vietnam we don't fillet anything. That's just not how it happened. In fact, we like to suck on the bone." So, like for me, I just don't want to temper that. And we put it in a beautiful crockery with fine linen in China. It doesn't look like Vietnam at all, but the bowl, it looks like Vietnam. And for me to present that, if you don't want to buy it. And I did, in fact, that dish I strike out a few times at Slanted Door because no one bought it in the first year.
So is there a particular dish that you've had since you started your restaurant that's on the menu today?
Oh, there's quite a bit of them. The dish that kind of gave me impetus to start the restaurant was the spring roll. My mom was her. Just a little background. I went to school studying. I came to San Francisco when I was in 8th grade in 1978. We left Vietnam 75. I went to junior high. I went to Mission High. I really want to be a potter. Is that Mission High? Oh, okay, cool. And I want to be a potter. My dad wanted me to be an engineer and doctor and stuff like that. And I ended up getting into Cal. I got into Cooper Union, but I ended up going to Cal to do architecture, so he'd get off my back of yelling me for doing art school. But during that time, I got a job bussing table in 78. He was a janitor. And I really saw the food business from the service side. And I went to school not knowing that I want to cook, and I guess I like to cook, and I cook a lot at home. My folks had 2 jobs. Then I left school, didn't finish school, and ended up running my folks' garment business. And I actually had a clothing store and tried to design clothes, but that didn't go too well. It wasn't really my thing. I was just trying to be an entrepreneur like my folks. They were doing stuff they'd never done before. Then that business, I went belly up and lost a lot of money. I was doing the savings and loan debacle. People filed Chapter 11. We lost a lot of money. Then I actually got into software and selling software for the SGI. and running around down here setting up dealers. And in post-production, we were trying to, go against like the Harry and the Quantel and so on using. But back then, I think it cost $50,000 to get 30 seconds into the computer of video. And that company went belly up, and that's when I had a little money from my job and started Slanted Door in 1994. It took me a year to build it. I always had this idea in my head to build Slanted Door in this small little place with a modern design and the food. But I never lost track that because of Shaping Eats in Berkeley, I always wanted something really simple, but my thing is always have a history and story with food. So when I'm learning Moroccan or Japanese, I like to go to the source, learn how the flavor, and just kind of come back and create the craft. Anyway, over the year, people ask me, I write a book, and
That was my next question. How come it's taken so long?
well, I never graduated in college, that's why. I don't like to do homework. And there's a reason why I didn't graduate from college. It's just I never finished my English 1A that I had to turn in my paper. But more seriously, I didn't think I have enough stuff. I think it's, you got to have enough thing to say to write a book. But finally, after about 2 years ago, my agent kind of convinced me to send out a proposal. And originally, everybody wanted a Slanted Door cookbook and recipe. And I didn't think like that was kind of cool. I always thought that it looks like a high school yearbook. And a couple years later, you go back and it's like, oh, who's that guy, I really want to do a book that show people how to cook. And more important, to give you the Vietnamese aesthetic. And the idea is to really want you to understand not only just how to cook, but how to eat this food and what's considered like why the Vietnamese eat it this way. There's a reason for it. Sometimes I don't know what the reason, but this is how they eat it. If they eat a bowl of pho, they would put the mint one thing at a time. They don't put the whole thing together. And the technique part, I see a lot of people don't understand like the stir fry, the steam technique. They just kind of blindly put the stuff together. So the whole emphasis of the book is like, okay, these are the principles of stir frying. These are the principles of grill. And these are the do's and don't. And if you understand that, it's going to make your life a lot easier how to cook this stuff, because this stuff is not, in fact, you shouldn't follow the recipe. I think you should understand why we do what we do, why we would brown the beef first or steam the broccoli first before we brown the beef, because there's a reason for it. If you do beef and broccoli stir fry, the broccoli is going to be hard and the beef is very, you want medium rare. You can't just throw everything like a salad bowl with a big flame underneath and toss it hoping that all the stuff's going to cook. So you got to steam your vegetable first, pull it out, brown your meat, make your sauce, and assemble it together. But most people just use the word, they kind of picture the word stir fry and they're just tossing. And same thing with grilling. Most people just go out and buy an expensive gas grill because they see them at Home Depot and they dream about it. That's not. I hate those things. Those are the worst thing. I think a great charcoal grill, if you know how to harness it and cook to those, it's just one of the biggest joy of cooking, is to really feel like you can do this in a campsite. And there's just basic rules that it takes 30 minutes to start your fire. Like all this, once you're comfortable with that, it's so easy to come home, start that fire. You don't buy briquette because I don't know what's inside. And with the charcoal, there's a lot of area. You stack up, it's got a lot of air, so when you light it, it catch on a fire faster. Briquette is just these little square things the rest of the world does not use, only in America. Right.
Yeah. So is there a particular recipe in the book that you're really proud of, or you think everyone should go home and make?
Well, no. I think, I think you should just pick some that intrigue you, like a technique, and focus on that and work on. There's some stuff it will take you 3 or 4 days to do. It's really hard. Those like the making the rice paper skin. You actually have to go to Home Depot first to buy, like making the tin, and it's just amazing. It's called bun cuốn. I made this. I was invited to cook at the Master. This is in Carmel, and they don't do that now. It's called Pebble Beach Food and Wine. And these are, they invite people all over the world, France, Germany, to cook, and super expensive. It was my first trip going down there, and they were like, we were fighting over the kitchen space, and me and this chef, she's since retired, this 60-year-old lady, we were relegated to the pastry department with a little Bunsen burner. And we made this steam thing. Basically, you get a ring, you get this piece of nylon fabric, like a parachute fabric, you stretch it with hose clamps. Then you make this batter, you pour it in there, you steam, you peel it out with 2 sticks, and you make this roll. And when we did that, the entire kitchen stopped. They all surrounded us. And it was one of those coolest moments in my cooking career to see all these fancy, 3-star, 5-star, whatever, Michelin restaurant chef to stop everything and see this thing with a little Bunsen burner. And she would just graciously wrap this thing. It's in the book. It's going to take you 3 days. And, but it's just supple, and it's just amazing, and makes me so happy to have these little peasant food competing with the caviar, the foie gras, the 5-star restaurant. And it's still, as long as you're sitting in a beautiful setting, a nice linen, and great food, it really doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yes, so when was the last time you were back in Vietnam, and can you share anything from your trip there? And also, what was...
Yeah, the book was shot in Vietnam. When I go to Vietnam, it's always a little blurry. Vietnam's amazing, especially today. I think I've been going back, first year I went back was 1992. I left 75, 92. The smell and sound, the sad thing is Vietnam just sat dormant for a long time. In fact, the year Bill Clinton came to my restaurant in 2000, in April, in June, he went back and opened up Vietnam. That's the year my relatives started seeing changes, started making money. Prior to that, they were pretty much living off probably $40 a month. They were in poverty, it was horrible, and Vietnam is prospering and growing. My wife's in Bangkok, so I've been going to Bangkok for the last 17, 18 years, and you really see the difference between the development, and Vietnam still try to catch up. Fortunately, they really know, learning how to protect their environment, so there are a lot of ban on teak export and antiquity export. But at the same time, they're like everybody else. They try to get, their Mercedes, and they try to get, live a good life, and it's changing a lot. So I do encourage you to go sooner than later. But it was a lot easier today, because back in '92, there are hardly any restaurant because people are poor. I think food follows money. When there's a lot of money, there's a lot of good food. And there's an amazing expat community there today compared to 10 years ago. And you find a couple of those guys, they'll tell you where to eat. I'm on the board called onevietnam.org, I think. It's sort of like a place where people can donate money back to Vietnam. That's another source you can kind of look for blog and story, because unfortunately we don't have Yellow Pages or Yelp or all this extensive review on restaurant like here we can look at. Over there still, restaurant could be gone in 6 months. So you kind of rely on local expert who lives there. My suggestion is do go. Try to not eat a whole lot of raw thing, and bring your Pepto-Bismol and diarrhea pill. You're gonna get sick not because it's got a lot of disease, but it's because you're overeating. If you're like me, when I travel, I eat 6 meals a day, so therefore, hence, I get sick. And I'm not going to tell you how many rounds of drink I have in between that. So by nature, you're going to get sick because you eat so much. But secondly, if you try to eat something warm, my first place usually is the wet market. The wet market's amazing. And I wish that we understand that more. In this country, we try to build more farmers market. Over there, they're trying to shut it down. They want Safeway. And it's just, crazy circle. the production chain from farm to table is very short. They have a lot of little farm. Little pig ride on a scooter, goes to the slaughterhouse and get cut up and goes to the market. If you go to these markets, you actually don't see any refrigeration. It looks a little scary, but if you smell it, if you open your nose, you notice there's nothing rotten, which means they killed it in the morning and they eat it that day. And they don't have tags say expire by October 15th. There's no expiration date. You literally smell it. If you can't figure out if it's rotten, then you shouldn't be cooking anyway. So unfortunately, they try to become us and we try to become them. And it's just kind of sad. I wish and in Hong Kong it's the same way. They're not, they don't really have, unfortunately, they don't have a lot of practices of protecting the fishery and so on, but still they don't have radar yet to go out and fish massive amount of fish, but they start getting to. In fact, a lot of tuna is coming out of the Vietnam water. In fact, a lot of places, a friend of mine, Paul Bartololi in Vegas, amazing restaurant at the Wynn, and he gets fish from mostly Italy, and most of his fishes actually come from Libyan water. And when Libya went to war, he couldn't have any fish to sell because a lot of these places are just getting fished out, and some of the places actually war-torn, nobody's fishing there yet. In fact, the joke is the fishes in Libya actually have beer, like long beards because they're so old. So anyway, Vietnam, it's a really amazing place to visit. And you go to the market, there are a lot of food there. You can eat the hot food, and hot food usually you're fairly clean, and just use your judgment. And sometimes you can look at the back of the stand if they have running water or not, if they're just carrying water to wash a bowl, stuff like that. And the market is just like a cool place to visit. But today there's so many restaurants, I can't tell you. It's probably 100 times more compared to like 10 years ago when I eat in Vietnam.
Yeah, so with architectural background, how much of an influence do you have on your restaurant designs, and what do you focus on?
Well, fortunately, I meet my dear friend now, my close friend, Ole Lundberg Design, in 2004 when I moved to the Ferry Building. He's in the book. There was actually a couple photographs. A lot of the book was shot in his outdoor kitchen in his weekend home in Sonoma Coast. So Ole, it's a funny thing. When everybody finds out that I was going to the Ferry Building, everybody sent a portfolio, and they say you should hire us. In fact, some architects say, I've eaten at your restaurant for years, and they would tear out their portfolio with a fusion restaurant with a Buddha head, and they circle it and they say, look, I do Buddha restaurant. And no one really gets who I am. And Ole, I went in there, and he had a big old shop. In fact, I was on my way to the dump in Cowheart and Hootie, and his receptionist say, do you know we're an architectural firm, right? We're not a contractor. He was going to throw me out. But anyway, we met, and I asked him how you would do my restaurant. He said, well, you take really simple thing, you make it really beautiful. I'm going to do the same, so I'm not going to give you fake formica, and really about the craft and building. So if you go to the Slanted Door today, everything is built by his shop, like the reception desk, even the table bases, the light fixture. It's about the craft of building, through that, the design, obviously. And that restaurant is 10 years old. It's getting like 1,000 people through it, and it's holding out pretty well. And he and I become essentially a drinking buddy, and that's why we're building this bourbon bar. In fact, there was like 400 bottles in his office right now because we got on eBay and collected all these vintage. We couldn't find them. Some of these are not existent at all. And crazy enough, last week eBay shut down the whole alcohol sales division. So we just got in the nick of time. So we got these amazing bourbon, interesting bourbon in the last 40 years. And the idea with this bar is an American whiskey bar. We don't have any scotch, and the whole idea is just preserving this culture that is dying by the day. I mean, when I first opened bar 10 years ago, we were buying this one company called Pappy and Van Winkle, and no one knows about it. In fact, you get on eBay today, it's running $250 to $400 a bottle. And we used to buy so much, that was our well bourbon. And we didn't, It's crazy. And we used to get our own barrel. And about a year ago, they cut us off because it was sold to a bigger company. And it's kind of bummer because I'm no longer dealing with the family, and the demand is so high that, so what happened in bourbon is you age it. You could have 100, 200 barrel, and they're all different. They put in these what's called rick houses, and they're not temperature control. In fact, the whole idea is just let Mother Nature does its thing. And the upper level is hotter, so the alcohol will go in and out of the charcoal char wood, and it absorbs some of the brown flavor. And each barrel tastes a little different. We used to get to pick our own barrel, but most manufacturers don't like to do that. They like to mix all, the 12-year-old mix it all and bottle it, so they have a consistent product. And we used to get our own barrel. It's Danny Meyer and myself, the only two people. And Danny, is an amazing restaurateur in New York City, and he's from St. Louis. And unfortunately, all this thing is gone. A lot of the distillery, it's all gobbled up by big conglomerates. So we try to save some of these, really the stuff we know is good that we're putting on the list. So this is sort of like a special place to buy a shot of bourbon before.
Yes. So being a big restaurateur now, what have some of your challenges been? Scaling up your operation, and also what's new on the horizon other than your bourbon bar?
It's always a challenge. I think just people. My chef Justine. She came to me like 6 months after I opened. We used to fight so crazy that a certain day I don't want to go to work because either I kill her or I fire her, one or the other. But now we're like, the left hand, the right hand, and just managing that relationship, because now she's got kids and she's got to move on because I used to be on the line every night and I have kids and I can't do that anymore. So she took over, and now she have kids. She can't do that. And finding the next generation constantly doing that. How do you keep doing the same thing and get people inspired? That's kind of tough, because I bore out of my mind making spring roll and shaking beef. But at the same time, it's my rent money, so I kind of have to do it. But we always try to find way to do it. But always creating these new projects, it really inspires the whole team. The constant struggle is always finding ingredient. We'll find a chicken farmer, like commodity chicken's about $1.10, $1.20 a pound. Like sometimes go down to 80 cents a pound. These are like the Tyson of the world. But organic chicken's $4 a pound, and they still goes out of business. At $4 a pound, they can't make it. And every year we see them go out of business, and our demand never go lower. We just get higher and higher on these demand. How do you do that? So often it's supplied by multiple farm, and sometimes we have to pay them more, and balancing between value to our customer and charging the right price. But often number doesn't lie. Sometimes you just got to charge a lot. And in hoping that, okay, maybe you shouldn't eat chicken every day. Maybe it should be a little bit more special. Maybe it's all wrong that chicken is $1.60 a pound. In Vietnam, when I was growing up, you get it once a month. You go kill the chicken, it's a big deal. Here, you can get chicken 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 7 days a week. So, and I think we got to realign what's important and not always say it's got to be cheap.
So I just have a quick question, then I'll open it up to the audience. What do you think the kitchen of the future looks like?
Well, it goes through these fads, right? In the 80s, when I was bussing table in 78, 79s, and this called Nouvelle Cuisine, like they give you like, it's almost like the Google logo, 3 color and 3 pieces about that long. And you're like, afterward, you got to go to Chinatown and get full because there's no food on those plates. And that was the 80s, right? And now, for a long time, then this whole, sous vide. But what I see lately is that our people are start getting fatigued of sitting 3-hour long meal, these fancy meal. They still want good food, but they just want it a little bit more casual. They can just get in and out and not have a sommelier come and talk to you and like on and on. I mean, they're always going to be fancy restaurant, but I think that it's just people are super educated now more than ever. When I first opened, I served maybe 5 whole fish the entire night. Busy restaurant, 300 customer, and 3 will come back. People are upset they saw the head. Today I serve 30, 28 fish a night, and there had not been a fish coming back within the last 7 years. And with the Food Network and all this stuff, people are just a lot more educated about what food, and so I don't even try to pretend like guess what people like or not like. I just put it up there. If it works, it works. It doesn't, I just pull it back. At this point, at some point, you just don't try to guess. But because I come from this angle of classic Vietnamese food, so I'm very confident in the food I put out. What they don't like, it just, then we can always adjust and not continue to serve the food. But product ingredients are so important, and also not, eating extinct fish like Chilean sea bass. In fact, there's a recipe in there. It was the first fish. I used to blow through about 50 pounds of flesh, just meat, a day at original Sanador, and they found out this fish doesn't reproduce until they're 40 years old. And in fact, today people say, Whole Foods starts saying it's okay, but I don't believe it. So I don't eat Chilean sea bass, but that is the fish for that dish, steam. I use a black bass now, but that fish is so much oil with 3 mushrooms steam. It's just sublime. You just can't eat it, unfortunately. And we try to substitute other things. Unfortunately, I have to admit that nothing even compared to come to that fish. And crazy enough, that fish, the hotel people loves it because you can stick it in that box for 2 hours and never die. And this is like one of those fish that will make you look good even if you can't cook.
All right, so I'd like to open up to questions. You mind stepping up to the microphone, please?
The French left their footprint on the colonial architecture of Vietnam. Can you talk about how they also left their footprint on the cooking of Vietnam? Are there any dishes which really combine the best of French classical cooking?
Well, everybody would say that the Vietnamese sandwich, the French left there. But I like to say that we took a French baguette and we made it 100 times better. Definitely the French had. The Chinese were in there much longer, and the dishes like the short rib, braised short ribs, it will be very minute difference. Like we don't have oven, we don't roast a bone. That's why the beef noodle soup, I blanch it in hot water. And that's why I want to explain all this to you, because French classic stock making, you blanch the bone, you coagulate the blood, so you simmer it, the blood doesn't break into a little microscopic and make your soup cloudy. And Vietnam, we don't have oven, and we have very simple tools, and you blanch it in hot water, you wash off all the gunk, it sucks the blood out inside the bone, the bandsaw, all the crud. So in this case, we don't have stock, so we use water to do the short ribs. And it's just much lighter, and we don't have the herb, the Provence herb. We use lemongrass and ginger and fish sauce. So it's a little different version. Then we try to do like really casserole, like French food, and we do a horrible job at it, so it's not in the book.
So you were talking about how customers are no longer sending back whole fish because they don't like the head. I'm imagining that authentic Vietnamese peasant cuisine probably still has some features that Westerners wouldn't be happy with. If you're a peasant cook, you don't waste any part of the animal. Chicken feet, that kind of things, intestines. Are you planning to introduce sort of more adventurous Vietnamese food?
I try. I did a Wu Hing general store, which is Chinese. I had braised pork knuckle. It's not a big seller. In fact, there's pork knuckle soup. One of the cleanest broth. Everybody know beef and chicken, but a pork knuckle soup in Vietnam, it's just amazing. You don't have to, I mean, I love chewing on the knuckle afterward. In fact, if you're gonna buy pig feet, you wanna buy the front. You know, the back's a lot tougher because the back need to kick more. So you buy the front feet, and we're that actually anal about like which part of the animal we eat. The tripe and that stuff, yeah, I always try to convert people to eat that weird stuff, but even my own family, my kids and my wife, and they don't buy it. But I think eventually there's always people that do it. I mean, Chris Constantino opened a restaurant, Nothing But Awful, in San Francisco. But things like shrimp paste, and if you don't talk about it, people don't get freaked about. I mean, we do a fish called Jagat Tan Long. It's a dish out of Hanoi that is named after the street. I mean, the street is named after the restaurant, and they only have one dish. And the only thing you choose is Heineken or soda or tea. That's your choice of menu. You go there because they give you only one dish. And the sauce is made out of this grind up anchovy sauce with pineapple. And it's one of the most amazing balanced sauce. But if I just give you the straight up, you know, anchovy, it just smells like sewage. You know, it's like, it smells pretty bad. But, you know, same thing with stinky tofu, but somehow people just kind of like that smell. So I can't explain it, but is it going to change drastically? No. It will probably a very small population. We'll probably have better bet in San Francisco than middle of the country.
Yeah, going back to the discussion about fish, do you see the future of this sort of sustainable cooking as figuring out direct replacements for each of these fish? Or do you think that we need to grow the recipes for the more sustainable fish like sardines and those?
Well, recipe is a recipe. You can't, if it doesn't work, like this recipe is pretty simple. The way what's happening today is like the East Coast had started learning how to manage their fish rate much better than the West Coast. The West Coast, that's why last year they found out, oh, the crab's not happening or the salmon is not happening. So they're kind of slow to catch up with that. But the success story, I can tell you the success story, like the black bass out of Maryland, the scallop. In the 70s, it got so bad that scallop was going to be extinct. And no one even know this. By the way, scallop is, if you eat great scallop, fresh scallop, it's amazing. And unfortunately, a lot of scallops are covered in this product called TSP. They preserve it, and they break down super fast, so that you have the word Dabo scallop is because the last day, whatever the last batch is, they don't cover this stuff. It's not waterlogged, so they charge more for Dabo scallop. We got to start eating farm-raised fish. We just got to eat the right one. You know, for a long time, salmon gave a really bad rep on the kind of, you know, these closed container, all these antibiotics was put in there, food coloring to make their you know. I think there's a book out called The Four Fish. I think it talks a lot about how to manage all this. In fact, the author talks about, you know, we don't go out and shoot a buffalo and put it in Costco, right? I mean, but we do that with tuna. And essentially, that's what we're doing. We shoot this wild animal, big, and we put it inside this mass scale, and we eat it like we just chuck it out some factory. So I think all of us in the community, from chef to consumer, we just got to make sure that we don't eat the fish that we can't eat. And the best place is really the Monterey Bay Aquarium chart. They do a very abbreviated version, you know, just kind of color coded. But for us, we go a level deeper. And sometimes, for instance, we'll use certain cod from the East Coast if they are if they line caught by the right family. And there's a balance also keeping these communities alive up in the Northeast. Like, you can't just say, well, you know, you can't fish anymore. I mean, sure, you can say that because you got a day job. They don't. So if everybody on top of it, the marketplace will dictate. If you go to a wedding, you say, I'm not eating Chilean sea bass. So hopefully enough people will do it. I guarantee you, even big hotel will stop using it. Because a lot of those guys, you know, they just worry about their job and they don't care anything else, and they serve the stuff, and we got to put pressure on them not to do the stuff because it's sad. Lobster is another great story. How is abundant now, the way they control their the way they don't let you pick female lobster.
You've talked about how you've gone back to Vietnam and all that. I'm not sure how often, but each time you do, you've seen them progress from when they first opened to all the progress they've made. They've become a lot more metropolitan and all that. Have you seen their food change a lot between when you left in '75 and what they serve now, what's become mainstream now, and have you gotten any inspirations from that for your own food?
Vietnam was very close off. When I was growing up, you only learn Vietnamese food. You might get influence, let's say, from a northern cook or a Hue, which is the central region. But today, there's sushi, there's tapas, there's French restaurant, and pretty soon I think they're gonna get Food Network. So they can't help themselves except to, when you give a cook something, they're gonna cook. They're not gonna say it's Japanese, I don't do it. They want everything you want, so and you can see how it affects it. But at the same time, there's a lot of local restaurants that are getting very busy because the local economy is doing well. And they just exploiting the bounty of what they can catch, and sometimes to their fault that they're eating little lobster they shouldn't be eating. And hopefully the country is smart enough to start telling people not to catch it. But it's pretty hard, They're not wealthy, so they don't have government money to regulate catching these little baby lobster. Going back to the lobster story, you got to be 7 inches from the back of the head to the tail. That's the only size you have to catch. If it had eggs, then you have to put it back and you put a notch in its tail. It's called the V-notch. And pretty much guarantee that lobster live forever. Because even you pick them up second time around without egg, you see a V-notch, you got to put it back. And in fact, about 4 or 5 years ago, Massachusetts decided to go along with everybody else because if the eastern seaboard, they go in circle, the lobster migrate in circle. So Boston, Massachusetts weren't going along with Maine, and finally they did it. And its lobster price has been stable. They got more than ever. And in fact, every 2 license that has to retire before one could be issued. And they have less people fishing. They get more product than ever. And I do recommend eating lobster in New England. I don't know why it tastes better. And I ship them here literally from a friend of mine boat, and it doesn't taste the same. I think the stress make them taste bad, and something about boiling in the local water. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so one more quick question. You said that in addition to the Monterey-based Sea Aquarium Guide, you go one step further. How do you do that? Do you work with local fishermen?
Well, there's a guy, Paul Johnson, who would Monterey Fish. He's got a book out. There's only a few guys I trust. And also when you travel, like today, all our shrimp is from Louisiana. We don't buy frozen shrimp anymore from Asia. It took me a long time. Finally, Jimmy Gallup, he started figuring out how to get these shrimp fly standby with Southwest. And I'm not kidding. And literally, he picks them up, covered in ice, and it's not even sorted. And it's so fresh because the shrimp comes in different sizes. There's bycatch. They sort it, and they cut the head off. It's all these labor. Frozen shrimp, Thailand, it's about $6-7 a pound. And fresh wild shrimp, it's about with head, which means you gotta have some waste there. It's about $14-16 a pound. And today, I think we only use less than 15% from wild shrimp, and the 85% come from frozen shrimp from Asia or across the globe. I don't have time to find out what's happening in Asia, and even Monterey doesn't know what they do over there. So I was happy to work with Jimmy and have all wild shrimp inside our restaurant. And the head break the shrimp down very fast. That's why when you buy shrimp, usually it doesn't come with a head because there's something chemical that makes them all measly. And the head is the best flavor. And you cut the head and you make, even if you don't eat it, the juice is coming out like the caramelized shrimp dish. It's a must. And even whole food, you buy frozen one, it's not the best, but it's still better than anything. And don't be afraid to use that.
Charles will be up here to sign your book. Thank you very much.